Okay, Hope Study Group, the call, the life and message of the Apostle Paul, session 4, Call to Love, Paul's second missionary journey, part 2. And since the video, the recording probably just started, we have Dee joining us from Florida with her sister. Sheila, right. So it's like an alternative universe here today. With Dee, instead of being here talking to Sheila, she is in Florida with Sheila talking to us here.
Talking to us here, he was making this being funny.
Okay.
Next slide, please. All right, the opening activity. There was not an opening act. Thank you. There was not an opening activity, so I had to make this one. Or the one they wanted us to do was really weird, so I made these questions. Yeah, it was. I try to make it like just a warm up.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, they wanted us to do like some kind of prayer where you count your breaths and all types of things like that, which I like to do, but not in a big group. What have you gotten out of this study of the Apostle Paul's life so far? Is it what you expected? Why or why not? So general questions. What do you think about this study?
I like it.
Yeah.
I think it brought his life.
Yeah.
Seeing where he was at and reading.
I don't know that it's any.
Yeah, I like on the video, I like seeing where, where he went, the ruin.
A little bit too about his personality.
Oh, we have someone else wanting to join us. And
Here says someone else wanting to join us, maybe Donna.
The Apostle Paul. That's the correct.
all right. And you can, it's okay to mute if you want to talk in the background. So, all right. So who's joined us?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I guess we'll find out.
What was that?
I didn't ask the second.
What is this?
Oh, I
You gotta
can.
go back.
The problem is we have to,
Yours is so tight. Oh, there we go. Let's do it. I know, that's what I wanted to do, but how do you get rid of that now?
resume sharing.
I do that good. Okay, and then, see if you can put it on here. I don't know if it will. It might.
There you go. Okay. And for review, what happened last week in Philippi? It's like a quiz, a pop quiz for you. And if you don't know, I'll give hints. There was 2 people, 2 events. One had to do with a male and one had to do with a female.
Oh, Lydia.
Yeah, see? First lady knows. I mean, that's Linda. No one let me call her that. Right, Lydia. And what did they do with Lydia?
Baptized whole family.
They baptized her and her whole family. Right.
Yep. And then he
And that
was
became
put in
the first
jail.
church in Europe, right?
Right, and that's the other one. He was in jail.
Now, why did he go to, why was he put in jail?
Preaching the good news.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
What was that?
Preaching the good news.
Yeah, but,
Casting the demon out of the.
That's right.
yeah, so
Yes.
when you said it had to do with a woman and a man, but see, that second incident has to do with a woman too.
But I think the way that they word it in the book is it was about the jailer,
Yeah,
not about the lady who cast the demon.
Yeah.
And why did he have to go to jail because of that, which is interesting. You would think it would be good if you're doing exorcism for somebody. And this is a
the
real
way that people.
right. Yes. Did everyone hear that? He
Yeah.
had to go to jail because he took away the slave owner's income.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right. And then he went to jail, and then remember he was singing in jail, and there's like
Earthquake.
Yeah,
Doors opened up.
and then they escaped, right?
No,
No.
they-
Stayed there.
No, they stayed.
My goodness, that's strange. And then the guy came back in, the jailer, right?
Yep.
He was gonna slit his throat. He was going, no, he was going to. He was going to, but what kept him from doing that?
they were all there singing.
Right, they were there. This is, Paul said, why, no, don't kill yourself. We're all still here, see? Very funny.
Yeah.
All right, and they converted him.
Yes, they did.
All right, opening prayer.
You want to sit here?
No, that's all right.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really an angle.
Yeah, when my neck starts to hurt, then I'll say something. All right, opening prayer. Loving God, we yearn to encounter you in your word. Make us aware of your presence as we seek to make your story our story. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Okay, session goals. As a result of conversations and activities connected with this session, group members should further explore Paul's second missionary journey, his ministry and opposition he faced, experience Paul's speech in Athens and explore its theology, explore parallels between first century Corinth and 21st century America. Sound like interesting things. Expand the understanding of life and ministry in the early church through an exploration of the first letter to the Corinthians, and continue to make connections between the life and message of Paul and our life and faith. Video, no? Oh, no, here, the biblical foundations. This might be familiar to you. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. By speaking tongues of human beings and of angels, but I don't have love, I'm a clanging gong or clashing cymbal. Love is patient, love is kind, it isn't jealous, it doesn't brag, it isn't arrogant, it isn't rude, it doesn't seek its own advantage, it isn't irritable, it doesn't keep a record of complaints, it isn't happy with injustice, but it is happy with the truth. Love puts up with all things, trusts in all things, hopes for all things, endures all things. Now faith, hope, and love remain, but these three things, and the greatest of these is love. And of course, that's 1 Corinthians 13. And they were using the Christian, what is that? Contemporary English Bible. So it might sound a little different, but it makes you feel like you're at a wedding, right?
Yeah.
All right, now here's the video. All right, so now we're gonna watch Adam Hamilton.
What would lead a first century rabbi to travel thousands of miles by sea and by land, to be beaten, imprisoned, and ultimately beheaded for his faith? It was a call to turn the world upside down. This is the story of the Apostle Paul, whose writings continue to shape the lives of 1/3 of the world's population. A man second only to Jesus in his impact and influence on the Christian faith, and whose witness defines what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. When we last saw Paul, he was leaving Philippi, having been beaten and abused and imprisoned, and then leaving the prison, he went to the town of Thessalonica. He argued with the Jewish people there and the Gentile God-fearers that Jesus was the Messiah. And there were some Jews who believed and many God-fearing Gentiles. And this created both jealousy and a concern that this false teacher was leading people astray. In essence, chased him out of town. He went on to Berea. They sought the scriptures and carefully listened to what he was saying. From there, Paul was led down to the town of Athens, where we are today. And in Athens, we're going to explore Paul's ministry here and some of the things that happened during his time of preaching and speaking and ministering in a community that was largely non-Jewish, Gentile, not even familiar with the Jewish scriptures. And so let's explore a bit of Athens. So Paul arrives in Athens. And the first place he comes is to the synagogue. The synagogue right behind me. These are the ancient, this is the ruins of the ancient synagogue. In the agora, the public square. And just above it, you see the temple to Hephaestus. And so you've got temples to all of the gods, or many of the gods around here. And in Athens, the public square was known as both the birthplace of democracy and the center of philosophy. So all around you were people who were coming to debate ideas and to share their philosophical ideas. And so Paul begins discussing the gospel in the market square. And after a time, the philosophers say, we want to hear more of this. And they wanted him to go with them to be able to present his ideas at the Areopagus at Mars Hill. Now, if you look around the agora here, you're going to find a large stoa, a large covered portico. There were also shops there. You'll find more centers of government. You'll find temples to various gods around. Now let's go together to the Areopagus, where Paul went and reasoned with the Epicureans and the Stoics. Let's go. So this is the Areopagus, about 450 feet above the rest of the city of Athens. And from here you have a panoramic view of the city. You can see the agora just below the hill, and you can see off into the distance. And when Paul was here, Paul would have seen dozens of temples to various gods from this standing point, from this spot on the Areopagus. Now behind me you see the Acropolis, and there are of course more temples to Poseidon, to Athena, the Parthenon, of course, as well as several others. But Paul stands up to speak. They say, we want to hear more of these ideas and these gods that you're proclaiming. And as he does this, he looks for a way to connect with them. And he says, I see that in every way you're most religious. In fact, I even saw a temple to an unknown God here in your city. And he says, that which you worship as unknown, I've come to proclaim to you. And then he begins to say these words. Luke records them in the book of Acts, chapter 17, beginning with verse 24. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. He does not live in temples built by human hands, and he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all people life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation on the earth, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Now, Luke tells us only a few believed in Athens. But you know, it only took a few. Paul might have left that day feeling a failure. Only a handful of people, 2 that are named in Acts, who put their trust in Christ. But in the centuries ahead, millions upon millions of people in the lands of Greece would put their trust in Jesus Christ. You have no idea when you plant a seed with somebody, the impact that could have, even if it's just one person or 2 people or a handful of people who have heard of Christ because of you. You have no idea the impact they could have. So Paul left feeling a failure, but in the end, God used him and his witness here to change the world in these lands. After a 2-day journey from Athens, Paul arrived here at Corinth. Corinth was the capital city, or the leading city, the center of government for all of what we would call Greece, Achaia. And what you see in the distance is the Gulf of Corinth. And this body of water leads out into the Adriatic Sea. What you see here is the Corinthian Canal. This is a marvel of engineering. It was conceived in the 6th century before Christ, but wasn't actually built until 1880. Construction began, it was finished in 1896. It took 13 years to build this. Now, prior to the building of the canal, what happened was ships would land at the Aegean port. They would be pulled off of the water, put onto dollies, and slaves would transport them 3.7 miles with all their goods on them across land on tracks, which you can still see, and then would deposit them back into the Gulf of Corinth. And so Corinth became one of the wealthiest cities in the Roman Empire. It was also known, however, as a place where the sailors would stay for the day while their ships were being ported over by slaves. And so taverns, brothels, temple prostitutes, all of these were a part of Corinth. And for this reason, Corinth itself became known as not only a wealthy city, but also as an immoral city. And Paul came here, and he spent 1.5 years ministering, starting in the synagogue, preaching the good news there, and then eventually into the marketplaces. proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. And we know that he wrote several letters here to Corinth, probably at least 4 to the people of Corinth. The letters demonstrate that there was a concern among the people for sexual immorality, questions about the meat market and what's appropriate to eat and not to eat. There were major divisions in the church. There was conflict in the church, and so Paul addresses that conflict. And I want us to explore together these ruins of the ancient city of Corinth. Let's go. So I'm walking on the streets of ancient Corinth right now, streets that Paul undoubtedly would have walked on. And I want to share with you a couple of things from here. First of all, in the background you see Corinth. This Acropolis was much larger than the Acropolis at Athens, and much taller too. This Acropolis is nearly 2,000 feet high. And at the top was the great temple to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. She was also the goddess Venus in Rome. And so the goddess of love, she had at her temple, it said, temple prostitutes who were at her service. And they offered their services to those who came and visited, as well as those who lived in the town of Corinth. And for a donation that was made to the goddess, they offered themselves. Now, as we come down these roads, I want to remind you, Paul came for a year and a half. He spent time first in the synagogue ministering with the Jews and the Gentile God-fearers, and led some of them to faith in Christ. Once more was expelled from the synagogue. He ends up in the public square, and there he's preaching and teaching, and he does this daily for a year and a half. And during that period of time, he has a profound impact on the city. One of the most amazing buildings in the archaeological site of ancient Corinth is the 5th century BC temple to Apollo. It towered over everything else in the city. It was a magnificent temple. Paul could not have missed this. He would have walked past it many times. He would have seen it every day as he was walking through the city. The sacrifices that were offered there, the animals that were sacrificed there, would have been slaughtered and their meat sold in the marketplace. This is something Paul addresses in one of his epistles to the Corinthians. So this was the marble street, one of the marble streets of Corinth, and back behind me the shops, and up above these shops was the temple to Apollo, and that left the meat market in a pretty close proximity to that. So the meat market was actually across the street, the rest of the market here, and the food that was sacrificed to idols, the animals that were sacrificed to idols, were butchered and sold in the meat market. And this is all part of what you read in Paul's letters to the Corinthians, was questions about meat that was sacrificed to idols. So this is a part of the commercial area of the city of Corinth. So now I want to take you to the Acropolis, the Corinth, where in Paul's day the temple to Aphrodite stood. So we're on the last leg of the road going up to the Corinth, and in the background you can see the Gulf of Corinth, and again the Corinth above us. Let's take a look. So this is as high up as we're able to go today. And you can see we've still got several hundred more feet before we finally reach the top of the Acropolis. What you can see from here, however, are the ruins of the ancient castles that were built over centuries. Beyond the top of the Acropolis that you can see here is the foundations of the temple to Aphrodite. And then you can see the gate that we could see down from the city as we looked up. You can see the gate. And that gate then opened up, and there was a road that zigzagged across this valley and made its way on down into the town. And you can still see the remnants of that road, the stones that are going across where the road had been paved all the way down into Corinth. In the church at Corinth, the believers were in conflict with one another. They had different parties or factions. And some were with Apollos, and some said they were followers of Peter, and some Paul. And Paul was calling them to lay aside those things that led to conflict, the pride and the arrogance and the disputations over things that ultimately didn't matter. And he reminded them that the primary characteristic of the Christian life was love. Now, many of you are going to be watching this video during an election year. Every 2 years in the United States, we go through this picking at the scab that divides our country, the wounds in our country. And we're divided, Republican and Democrat. We're divided over issues in so many ways. And during that time, we forget that we're bound together by Jesus Christ, that we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And we allow this to tear us apart. And we as Christians ought to be that bridge that brings people together, that reminds people by our actions, that demonstrates to people how you live with your differences and yet still love. I want to invite you to do that in your church and in your community. And so I want to end by reminding you at this place where the goddess of love was worshipped, how Paul defined love and how he challenged us to love. And this is what he said in that famous chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Listen to these words. He said, if I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. And then he describes what that love looks like. And he says this, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude. It's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. This kind of love never fails. And then he ends the chapter in this way, and now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Argue, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so the second question, what were some of the issues Paul preached about in Corinth and why?
Well, there was the meat market.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's
Sex without marriage.
right.
Yes.
That's a big one for them, of course. Yeah.
What was the issue with the meat market? I don't. get that.
Food that's given to idols.
Yeah.
That sacrifice to idols. He talks about that in 1 Corinthians. And what happens is they would take the food that was sacrificed to idols, they would
Right.
leave it out in front of the idols overnight. And I guess the priest would come out overnight and take the food and eat it. But the point was it was left out to be sacrificed to false gods. And at one point he even calls them demons. And is it okay to eat? The question is it okay to eat that food?
And they would also sell it at the meat market,
Yeah,
That's
that's
what
what
they
I
said,
meant.
yeah.
raise funds, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so then they would sell it, yeah.
Hmm.
So is that food okay to eat?
First of all, it had to be bad.
Yeah, if it's sat out all night.
Yeah,
Wow.
right. Exactly.
It was all cooked, it was all cooked.
Oh, it's cooked?
Yeah, they would cook it, yeah.
Still.
They still do that today. I talked to someone,
Mm.
I should have put this in as a picture, but I didn't have enough time to see. I talked to someone in Vietnam, Vietnamese, and they had their ancestral worship. And they still leave the food out for I guess the ghosts of their ancestors to come and eat. And afterwards they eat it after, obviously the spirits don't come to eat it. So there's not many Christians there, but it's a real concern for them. If you're a Christian and you're with your family and they've given this food to the ancient spirits, whatever, your family members, and then they take it, can you eat it? So it's still an issue for them.
Yeah, well, it's an issue of scruples,
Yeah.
if you know that this was used, if there was something wrong with it to start out with, is it okay for you to partake of it? That's the sort of thing that many Roman Catholics are going through right now with the coronavirus vaccine, because certain vaccines were used with aborted fetal tissue. And since they are strongly against abortion, can they use the vaccine, which was made in that way by the sacrifice of fetuses, okay? And so they don't want to partake of the vaccine. And it's very strong. In fact, the Archbishop out in San Francisco strongly condemned anyone who used the vaccine you know?
The
And,
Pope was vaccinated.
Yeah, the Pope was for vaccines.
yeah, the Pope is for vaccines, right? But so the Pope was criticizing the Archbishop because the Archbishop was being more Catholic than the Pope.
Hmm.
I
So
didn't think the vaccines were made from fetuses to
They're not.
stop COVID.
some are.
Some, not all.
The first one's experiment.
Yeah.
The issues in Corinth, yeah, and so what I'm thinking is, in the first book of Corinthians, almost everything he talks about is behavioral problems, except for the 15th chapter, which is about the resurrection, which is theology, but it had to do with their context. What kind of city was Corinth? Why was sexual immorality more common there? And how did Paul try to counter it? Go ahead.
Because of the boats, the sailors.
Well, it also had the temple of Aphrodite, the goddess of love,
Oh.
and all the, they had thousands of prostitutes living up there. And so these sailors would walk up the hill, just like Adam Hamilton did, except they got all the way to the top. Which Adam Hamilton didn't do.
Yeah, do sailors have a good reputation for when they come into port and stay overnight or whatever?
After having been at sea for weeks and
Yes.
weeks, yeah.
Yeah. And they're just gonna be there for a night or two, yeah,
Yeah.
that was the same.
So
thing.
how did he counter it? He countered it, well, with the Corinthians, he countered it by writing 1 Corinthians 13. And teaching them about the nature of love.
Yes.
But he also condemned the immorality. He talked about being the temple of the Holy Spirit. If you recall, he said, do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? And therefore you should not join, your body with that of a prostitute, because you're mixing, God with pagan gods.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, there he was, Aphrodite, in the ancient world, she was the goddess of love. And there, it's like he's saying, no, that's not love. Okay,
Huh.
this is the very relevant one for our day. What does Adam Hamilton say we can learn about political disagreements by observing the Corinthians and what Paul told them? So the context is, in the beginning of Corinthians, he talks about how one person is of Apollos, one person is of Paul, and then he says, no, you're all of Jesus Christ. Remember, I was saying last week, I had that professor that wouldn't talk when it was quiet. He would say, I could sit in silence forever.
It's a hard question to answer. That's why it's silence, because I'm trying to figure out how to answer the question.
Yeah.
And agree to disagree, knowing, as you said, that we're all God's children. We all
Yeah.
have different
Yeah.
opinions, we have free choice, that's what God has given us.
Yeah, as long as it's not like about the gospel itself. Of course.
Well, political disagreements, when Hamilton was putting this program together,
Yeah,
political disagreements were not as vicious as they are now.
yeah.
And so he's thinking in a context where people were still talking to one another.
Civil, yeah.
Yeah, and we've gotten way past that now.
Yes.
And now we have the FBI being used to investigate people who have different political opinions and stuff like that. It's a whole different world that we're living in from the one that he was addressing originally.
What year was this book written? Somebody, I know it's an older one.
I think it was about,
It's not old.
I think it's about 5 or 6 years.
Oh, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear that verse, I think about,
2015.
okay, yeah, so that's different. I kind of think about not so much.
It was pre-Trump. It was
political.
pre-Trump, by the
Yeah.
way.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I don't think so much political as I think of it like I am of Wesley, I am of Luther, I am of Calvin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how Christians have dealt with it in the past.
I am not.
And that was very violent too, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of violence between Christians back in the time of the Reformation.
Oh,
You know,
Yeah,
people were
that's
being killed.
yeah,
in the name of faith.
yeah, that's hard for us. to
Yeah, the
think about.
Inquisition, you know, the Jesuit movement. And, you know, and the Lutherans were not very good to the Anabaptists. They were killing them. And it was pretty, they were not talking to one another.
Yeah, I just always remember the one Calvin had approved of someone being killed because I think because they were Anabaptists. Yeah, but
Mhm.
they didn't agree with infants being baptized. They thought that only adults should be baptized, and he'd let the people kill someone for that. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Anything else for this one? There isn't that many questions because
Hmm.
there isn't.
Well, it does, in its own way, though, it does show us how far things have moved since the book was written.
Yeah.
You know, this is all pre-Donald Trump. And it was a whole different world, you know. It was a whole different world politically before Donald Trump. There were people who were opposed to Obama, but not with the same kind of vitriol that was hurled at Trump and his administration. So it is interesting just to note that.
Paul was teaching love too, so you have to look at it in that
Mhm.
perspective.
Certainly
It's
within,
not
Matter
after
what.
Trump, that where is love, you know?
yeah, there is,
Personally, I don't see any love right now politically.
no.
And maybe there never really was love when you're dealing with political parties, but you know, that's what Paul was trying to teach. Fortunately, not everybody's getting it today.
No.
Mhm.
And even if a lot of times, even if you try to talk like that, that will be skewed into some, like you can't say anything because people don't hear what you're saying. They hear opposition to their political view. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now you now you're in a culture where if you use the wrong pronoun to refer to a person, you're committing some kind of cultural sin. Yeah.
That's very true.
Definitely. Okay,
Wow.
this is Acts 17, 2-4. Will someone volunteer to read this for us?
I'll read it. As was Paul's custom, he entered the synagogue, and for 3 Sabbaths interacted with them on the basis of the scriptures. Through his interpretation of the scriptures, he demonstrated that Christ had to suffer and rise from the dead. He declared that this Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ. Some were convinced and joined Paul and Silas, including a larger number of Greek God worshippers and quite a few prominent women from Acts.
Acts 17, 2-4. All right, so he is in Thessalonica. We're in Thessalonica now. What form did Paul's okay, so this is Bible and book study. So if you're not going to get this answer from the video, what form did Paul's opposition take in Thessalonica?
I think they beat him up, right?
I believe that's, well, it's Acts 17. Oh, yeah. Acts 17, 1-9 is when he's in Thessalonica. I would imagine, though, the answer would be in our reading.
Well, why don't you look at Acts? That would be.
Okay. Paul and Silas traveled to, I don't know. They came to Thessalonica where there was a synagogue. So there's everything that we just heard. But the Jews were jealous and gathered some of the worthless loafers from the streets and formed a mob. They set the whole city in an uproar and attacked the home of a man named Jason. Oh, you remember this story. In an attempt to find Paul and Silas and bring them out to the people. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city authorities and shouted, "These men have caused trouble everywhere. Now they have come to our city." And Jason has kept them in his house. They are all breaking the laws of the emperor, saying that there is another king whose name is Jesus. With these words, they threw the crowd and the city authorities in an uproar. The authorities made Jason and the other pay the required amount of money to be released and then let them go. So they were in prison. I think Jason was the president of the synagogue. He lived across the street from it.
It was interesting too, the phrase that that translation doesn't have is.
Is this the good news?
Yeah, these men have turned the world upside down.
Right, that's the next question.
Yeah.
So this is the personal question. Those opposing Paul and his colleagues accused them of turning the world upside down. Do you think that accusation can be made of believers today? Why or why not? Turning the world. Does this say world or word? Because that's a
World,
big difference.
Turn the world upside down.
Oh, when I was writing this, I was wondering.
No.
I don't remember. All right, it's world. Excuse the typo. I am not a professional. I want to see what the book says.
It does say world.
It does.
Yeah.
So I wrote it wrong. All right. I was thinking of the word.
That's because of your sermon lesson.
Yeah, the last few weeks. All right. So do we turn the world upside down?
Jesus spoke about
Right.
himself as a spiritual king. Did Paul, did he preach to the people that this is not the king that we consider? We don't consider Caesar, and he's a different kind of king.
They didn't even think he was a king, right?
No, but he, in this
Yeah.
instance, he preached, you know.
I think they said that to get the emperor, to get the people mad. It's like, oh, there's another king that
Yeah.
opposes Caesar.
Yeah. People from the synagogue said that, so they didn't get them riled up.
I guess there are certain religions today. We don't always say, even evangelicals who don't maybe not feel the same way we as Lutherans do. So there might be some religions that might think they want to turn the world upside down and think that they're doing it.
Oh, I think there are, and I think we see it more in the southern states
Yeah.
than we do where they're more conservative.
Well, you know, when you go on to Acts 17,
Jehovah's Witnesses.
well, they don't have any idea who Jesus is. No, they don't.
I know.
They're complete heretics, yeah.
But they still think they're turning the world upside down.
Well, I don't think they are.
They'd like-
But the sermon that he preaches after this, all right, in Athens, he says, "The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him." And then he goes on and he says, being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art of man. He goes on to say, in times of ignorance, God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he's fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this, he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Okay, that's a pretty strong statement about Jesus.
Yeah, that is.
And where is that? Where did you read
That's,
that from?
that's the sermon in Athens.
Yeah, we're about to get
We
there.
haven't gotten to Athens yet, but no, it's very clear that he preached the resurrection and that he preached the lordship of Jesus and so on. You know, whoever confesses that Jesus is Lord and believes in his heart that God raised him from the dead
Romans
will
10.
be saved. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't mean to disagree, but I think maybe Jesus told us to turn the world upside down, but we don't do that. I don't think we could be accused of doing that, not at all.
No, we're much tamer than that. Yeah.
Maybe in like
Yeah.
Asia or
Yeah, Christians don't offend anybody anymore. We don't stand for anything.
We don't stand up for what we believe in.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the answer.
I don't know what we're afraid of.
That's a tough question.
Yeah, we don't want to refer to God as he.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to do that anymore in church,
Um,
unless you're reading from the Bible, when it does.
yeah, that'll be done soon. All right, in Athens, who would like to read that?
I'll read it. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" That's good. Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus,
You got it.
where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Agapol, I don't know,
Yep.
and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious."
That's Acts 17, 16 through 22. So that's the beginning of Athens. So that sets up the context. And now I'm supposed to read the speech that Paul makes.
That's what I was reading a moment ago.
Yeah. So how far did you get?
Pretty far.
Paul stood up in front of the city council and said, "I see that in every way you Athenians are very religious." Blah, 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 blah. From one man, he created all races of mankind. All right, I'll just read the last paragraph. "We too are his children. Since we suppose that his nature is anything like an image of gold or silver," you read that. "God has overlooked the times when people did not know him, but now he commands all of them everywhere to turn away from their evil ways. For he has fixed a day in which he will judge the whole world with justice by means of a man he has chosen. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising this man from the dead." When they heard Paul speak about it, raising from the dead, some of them made fun of him, but others said, "We want to hear you speaking about this again." And so Paul left the meeting. Some men joined him and believed, among whom was Dionysius, a member of the council. There was also a woman named Damaris and some other people. All right, so for the first set of questions, you have to pretend, is this it? Yes. Pretend like you're in the first century and you're Greek. And then there'll be another question, I think it's the last one, where you get to no longer be an Athenian. So what did you think about what Paul had to say about the unknown God?
I think at that point in time, it was very confusing for them. I think it's confusing for a lot of people today. I mean, we need faith to believe in what the Bible says. And so back then, when they were having prostitution and killings and whatever. What did they know about this Jesus that died and then came back to life again? I mean, and then disappeared again. So it's like, I think if I was in that time and day of what you're asking, I would find it very difficult. Because I got all these other gods around me, these beautiful temples,
Right.
Yeah.
that are a god of love and a god of this and a god of that.
Yeah, they had specific things to relate to, whereas
Right.
this was.
Right, this was nothing.
Yeah, how would they know? I don't know. How would they know that temple prostitution was immoral?
Mm.
There was
Well,
no-
they knew the law, they knew, they knew the Old Testament.
No, they didn't.
No,
use it.
no,
That's right.
Only the
No.
Jewish people.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
some
right.
of them would have been innocent.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
No, it's part of their belief system that it was not immoral, it was moral. Because what you were doing, you were offering yourself as a sacrifice to the goddess of love.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a religious ceremony, so to speak. Maybe a little bit less ceremonial than others, but no, but the idea was that you were performing a sacred act
Yeah.
by engaging in a sexual relation with one of these priestesses, okay?
Yeah.
So it was not, we consider it immoral, but in their case, it was very religious,
Yeah. That's,
you know?
It's interesting.
I think people are able to twist their thinking around into ways of behaving and so on that are just totally, incredible from our point of view. The other day in Newsday, there was an article about France, and it said that the French government has determined that 330,000 children have been abused by Roman Catholic priests and lay people. Through the church. And 330,000, okay? Now, somebody had to do a little bit of rationalizing
that's a lot.
to get away with that sort of behavior. You can see some people as just being perverts, but 300,000,
Yeah.
there's something very strange about that. There must have been some rationalizing going on.
On how long a period of time?
Yeah, it was over 20 years, something like that. Yeah, it wasn't just in the
Still, that's a
past
lot
month.
of-
It's still in 20 years. It's still a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And that's not to pick on Roman Catholic, it's just to say that, here you would think these folks are religious, but their religious values allowed them to do things that are quite different from what we would think.
Well, what do you think he means by unknown God? Do you know? It's kind of a hard concept. But okay, they literally had a statue that said to the unknown God.
Right, monument, yeah.
Mm.
Well, it was kind of like,
I think they were hedging the bet in case they
Yes.
got somebody.
That's how I've understood it. Yeah, just in case they missed someone. Yeah, yeah, that's what they're doing.
yeah, in a sense, like none of the above or something like that.
And Paul said, "I'm here to tell you about the unknown God." It's
Right.
kind of cool, you know.
Yeah, it's very good, very good picking up on that.
All right. Did you notice he quoted two of our? So now we're Athenians. So it's our poets. How did he apply those quotes to the God he was talking about? Don't know. I always remember the part about the Epicureans and the Stoics, but
What was an Epicurean? I forget.
there's a lot of Epicureans these days. It's someone who basically believes in pleasure.
Yeah, somebody that watches the Food Channel 24/7
That's a nice way of putting it.
and enjoys it, and then does the recipes. All right, you got to push it to the
Someone in the
ultimate limit.
flesh.
Yeah,
But I noticed when you had that question for Epicurean and Stoic was capitalized.
Yeah,
I was wondering why.
well, Epicurus was a philosopher.
Oh, and.
And the Stoics were
Oh, so
part
they
of
were
a,
people, so
it was
that
a
wasn't a
movement.
word.
the
Yeah.
Stoic movement.
Like a school, yeah.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because today you still hear those words. I mean, I know they sound a little weird, but like in a philosophy book, it would still talk about them because it was ancient Greece and they were so, they were so.
Well, the phrase that's associated with Epicureanism is what we've all heard: eat, drink, and be merry. That's
Yeah,
that's a basic
exactly.
slogan of the Epicurean. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die.
Mhm.
And it's that kind of attitude towards life. Go for the gusto. Get everything you can now. Don't wait till tomorrow.
And Stoics, that's like something that I always try to preach against. It's when they're never moved by anything. Like they're just unemotional and they think that's strength. Like that's being strong. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, nothing can, shake this person's belief.
Mhm.
It's like when liberals watch Fox News. They can't be shaken because they're so committed to a belief. It's interesting. And I'm sure there are probably Fox News people that do the same thing.
Mhm.
It's that kind of attitude that, don't confuse me with the facts. We're concerned about facts, not truth.
Here it is. As someone has said, in him we live and move and exist. That's the quote. And when you read it seems like it's an Old Testament quote, but it's not.
No.
Okay, here it is. Okay. Verse 28. As someone has said, in him we live and move and exist. It is as some of your poets have said, we too are his children. And it says, since we are God's children, we should not suppose that his nature is anything like an image of gold or silver or stone.
Mhm.
So
it's very similar to the kind of, a lot of people will say, oh, we're all God's children, which is not a Christian statement, but it is a very common statement. And it actually is quite foreign to Christianity, but it is a very common way of talking. We're all God's children.
So how does he apply that quote to the God he was talking about? The quote is, we too are his children.
That's Paul talking.
That's Paul quoting.
He's using that quotation.
Yeah.
So is he talking about God? God, capital G God?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's talking about God.
Well, how does he go on to use it? What does it say in the verses
It
that
says-
follow?
It says, as some of your poets have said, we too are his children, close quote. Since we are God's children, we should not suppose that his nature is anything like an image of God or silver or stone, shaped by the art and skill of man. God has overlooked the times when people did not know him, but now he commands all of them everywhere to turn away from their evil ways. For he has fixed a day in which he will judge the whole world with justice by means of a man. He has chosen. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising that man from death.
So if we are in the image of God, we're not made out of gold and silver or stone.
Also the idols. I thought it was talking about
Yeah.
the gods they worship.
Yeah.
The idols.
So he's saying the real God is not a statue. The real God is other than that.
Oh, I see. So he takes it, since we are children of God, then God can't be a piece of wood.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's very
Yeah.
similar to the prophet Isaiah, where
You're right.
prophet Isaiah makes a big thing out of the fact that, here the people take a piece of wood and they carve it into a statue, and then they begin to worship something which they made with their own hands. Does that make any sense at all?
That's what my dad always says. You cut off half, put it in the fire, and you worship the other half.
Right. That's literally what Isaiah said.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
it's
says,
funny.
use half of it for firewood, and then the other half you make a statue and you worship.
Yeah, you worship it.
Weird.
It's crazy. All right, what was his argument about not worshiping things made by human hands? Did you agree or disagree? Why or why not? I think we just went over that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Why would it say, did you agree or disagree? Who would agree with it?
You wrote the question, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't write this.
Okay.
This is from the book.
Yeah, but if you're not worshiping the true God, think about today. How many people worship a sports team or money, and they put all of that before the real God? So when it's the question is, do you agree or disagree? How many people agree that you should worship other things? I don't know if I'm making sense. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, that's really
phrasing
good.
it
That's,
right.
Yeah, you're right.
that's a very important point. Yeah, I was
But-
watching on TV this morning, and they showed this football stadium, which had like 80,000 people in it. And at the end of the game, because the team won, I guess, the whole field was, crowded with people. I mean, why are they doing that?
Well, I mean, it's exciting, yes, to congratulate the teams and everything like that. But people put all of that stuff ahead of our God, their true
Yeah.
God.
Sure.
And that's like what the people did in ancient times with idols.
Of course,
Yeah.
because you're going back to one of the statements before, they rationalized that it was okay to participate in prostitution. They rationalized that was a good thing because they were worshiping the God of love, or the God of prostitution, and so they rationalized it.
Yeah, and the people.
Just the way you were saying before about the priests that abused children.
Yeah, yeah.
These people rationalize that, oh, it's okay.
Oh,
It's okay to do these things.
Not only
So-
that, not only that's okay, but that
No.
it is a holy thing that they're doing.
Exactly.
There's a godly
Exactly.
thing that they're doing.
Right. Exactly.
but they think that today, in today's world,
For people, sure.
It still goes on today. There's still all
I
these
know
different.
Yeah, that's why the prophet says, woe unto those who call good evil and evil good,
good. Yeah.
Right.
and there's a lot of that going on today.
Right.
So, yeah, what made his speech different was that he was saying that the time is coming when there's going to be judgment,
Right.
that God has fixed the day in which he will judge the world in righteousness.
Right. And we have to be ready.
Yeah, so he's saying, you can't keep doing this forever.
This is the question I was talking about.
Yeah.
You're no longer ancient Athenians, you're yourself. The church in Athens would eventually impact millions. So it says that in the Bible, it says that when Paul went away, not many people were converted. But if you look forward, those few people set the background, set the foundation, and Athens, well, we know that, Athens became a huge church. How do we measure success in our churches today?
Mhm.
How much money we cost? No, only kidding.
That's one of them. Yeah.
I don't, but that's one of them.
Yeah.
How many people are in the church?
Exactly.
It's really it's so strange now. COVID has really kind of pulled the rug out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Even the ELCA annual parochial report that every pastor files
Mhm.
had a formula for computing what your worship attendance was during COVID.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In other words, we used to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it's 6 times some kind of factor
Who
that
was
they,
online and who was
they, yeah, I mean, they gave
Yeah.
you they gave you a number to multiply it with to figure out what your real attendance was. When of course it's not true, but you know, but the point is that the point I'm making is that somehow that figure is important. But I don't know why it's important, especially right now. Everybody can understand that church attendance went down during COVID. So let's move on to the next year, you know, I mean, so you have figures that are low for 1 year, but everybody is in the same boat. You know, the real question is, what are you gonna do about those figures this year, next year? Yeah. And why is it important? You know, that was the more important question.
We had our intentional interim that we had, Pastor Ivan. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, we had people in our congregation, we're a small congregation. And there were people in the congregation that felt we were not successful because our congregation is so small. And
Yeah,
I remember he just kept on drilling in our heads, the ones that needed it to be drilled. I don't even know if it got drilled. You don't need a whole lot of people, as long as the people in your church. If it's only 50 people, but they're doing God's work,
right.
why do you need
Yeah.
250 people when 100 of them are probably sitting around doing nothing?
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if everybody
Yeah.
got that from, you know, but
Yeah, I was thinking of some of the, like, I forget who it was that we just ran into. Some of the born again churches and all that, you know, they attract a lot of people. And, you know, I don't mean to be talking bad about them, but, you know, I think they attract a lot of people, but, you know, I don't know if they're attracted to the music or like who was it we just ran into?
Yes, it's
Oh, the guy
amazing.
that cleaned our carpet said, oh, I used to go to True North Church, you know, but it doesn't really stick. So I think it's what you're saying too. It's what the people do. It's proof in their lives and in their belief rather than the numbers.
You know, some churches are built like barns with doors at both ends. So people come in and they spend some time there and then they go out the other end.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a movie theater.
No, like a barn. You come in one end and you go out the other.
end. What movie you got?
So you're constant, no.
I've never seen a barn in real life.
What?
Welcome to Long Island. Anyway, so the point being that there's a constant flow through the barn,
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
If there was only one door, then it would get all clogged up.
I see.
Yeah.
They don't go out the indoor, they go out the outdoor.
Out there.
And what that really means metaphorically is that they disappear. And nobody's gonna look for them either,
No,
because they're
no.
gone.
Yeah.
They've got to deal with the ones who are coming in. So
Yeah,
they're constantly dealing with the ones who are coming in and not worrying about the ones that are going out.
you're right, yeah.
And that's not just a born again phenomenon that's happened in our church here. You know? Yeah,
Well, I think that's true because even in our church, when we did get a new pastor, there were people in the congregation that wanted to go back. I've been a member there for over 50 years. That wanted to go back to the people that were there 40 years ago, who've already now ascended on other churches. Even they've been ascended on your church already and try to
Went
get
out
them.
the other door.
Yeah, and try to get them back. It just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Oh.
yeah, it's the most
I
frustrating
try to
thing.
tell these people, they've gone on to newer and better things. They're gonna come back to us. Why? It just doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So that kind of measurement is really not a very helpful one.
My guess is that a lot of these people that go to the mega churches, there is still a small nucleus
Mhm.
in that community
Sure.
that does the thing that Jesus
Oh,
taught us to
absolutely.
do.
Right.
The rest of the people are there for other reasons, you know, music.
Well, you know, in a positive sense, there are a lot of people who are seeking God.
Yes,
And so,
Yeah.
you know, in churches like that, where they're
Attracts
offering
them.
a message about God freely and publicly and welcoming people to come in, isn't that good that people will respond to that? And again,
That's
that's
true.
kind of a criticism of what we do, because, you know, we don't attract an awful lot of seekers.
Right.
And I just recall a few years ago, somebody came to church here on Sunday morning, and I talked with them afterwards and so on. And she said to me, well, you know, I've always wanted to come to church. I'm not a Christian, you know, I've always wanted to come to church. I would like to learn more about how to be a Christian. Can you give me some kind of book that I can read? And apart from the Bible,
Yeah.
I really didn't have anything to give her. I mean, Lutherans don't produce books to help somebody who are not Christians to come to faith in Christ. I mean, we just don't do that. We assume that they're already Christian and they just kind of keep moving on.
Did she ever come back?
Huh?
Did she ever come
No,
back?
no. I did give her a book, but it's the books that we don't produce that kind of
We all
material.
know what it is.
Maybe she went to a born again church and got a book.
Yeah.
A few things about this is, one of the things I like that Pastor Paul from St. Paul says is he doesn't care if you leave, if you're going to another church, if you're going to worship somewhere else. This is very different from when I was in New Jersey and I was at a Presbyterian church all the time. My mother was the secretary there. And the pastor who was from Philly, he would get really mad because a lot of the people at his congregation were going to the evangelical, the church with the young people in it. And he would say, you're stealing, the church is only so big because they steal all of our members. Yeah, he would say that all the time, yeah. And the people they would be.
I can say that about Pope.
Yeah. But not
What?
Steal our people.
Oh, we do?
Your church.
Yeah.
Well, who have we got that you prepared?
Servers 50 years ago.
Oh, come on.
Don't hold a grudge
Nancy
there.
Lord,
my goodness.
Nancy
Rosa.
Rosa. Yeah, who else?
Oh, Nancy.
Oh, Nancy, yeah, she's in Connecticut, yeah.
Oh, she moved?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, somebody stole her from us.
So.
Well, was Joyce, Rose was a member.
Rose was in
Rose
Rose.
was in
Oh, Stone was in
Another thing is when I was in Florida, I was in South Florida at the Calvary Chapel down there, and it was the 9th biggest church in the country at the time. The sanctuary had 4,000 people in it, like per service, not per weekend, per service, 4,000 people. It was filled too.
Wow.
And the guys, and 100% the people go there because of the music. It's definitely, people choose what church they're going to go to because of the music mostly. But I mean, there are other things, but that's important.
And the freedom, two of those churches, they're free and they're not liturgical, we're so.
I don't know. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So maybe it's a good thing then. I mean, that there are different things for different folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're wrong.
My point
They're
was,
wrong. They're wrong.
when he said, one time he said to us, I don't care how many people are in the church. I just need like 100 people, just like you were saying, 100 people that are dedicated to the church.
Mhm.
But here he is, he's got millions of people, but that wasn't how he measured success. All right, so there's a lot more to that. There were other questions, but
Wow.
I'm
Yeah,
looking at the time.
Our time is really getting away.
Yeah. All right, so closing prayer. Loving God, guide us as we seek to imitate the most profound example of love made incarnate, your Son, Jesus Christ. Make us aware of your presence with us, guiding us by your Spirit as we continue our journey as followers of the way. In the name of the one who came to show us what your love is like, your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Pastor, I have a question for you.
Interesting.
You mentioned something, you made a statement about children of God,
Yeah,
and you said that there was something wrong with that statement. Is
Yeah.
that different from being God's child?
sure. Well, in
So
the
what's-
biblical sense, a child of God is someone who's baptized.
Yes,
Yeah,
because
You're adopted.
I know I'm a child of God, so you said we are children of God, it's not,
Well, I'm just
What
saying
did they
that there's
say?
a common cultural statement
everyone.
which says that we're all God's children,
Right.
and we're all God's creatures. God created us all,
Yeah,
but not everybody really
Is a child.
belongs to God. I mean, they don't have a sense of,
that's right.
I belong to God, and
So it's
Uh,
not God that doesn't take them.
no, of course not.
It's the children. It's
Yeah,
the
God
people.
created us
Right,
all, right.
okay.
But there's a lot of people who have no allegiance to God and no desire. Yeah, that's all I meant by that. And just to assume that everybody has, it's like on the back of a dollar bill, you have "In God We Trust," but the question is, what God? What God, you know?
All just pay cash.
The god of money.
Well, no, I mean, for the people came up with the phrase, it meant something, but you know, what does it mean now? That's the question. Yeah.
Daniel, why did you leave the independent church?
Dale,
Dale.
I could never be a pastor there. You gotta be real popular. I couldn't be a pastor. I tried to be a pastor after I graduated seminary. I tried to be a pastor with the Pentecostal, but I wasn't like an in-person. I wasn't like and not just anybody can be a pastor, even if you have the credentials. Like you have to be an in-person, like somebody's son or something like that. So then my pastors who grew up with me, you know, the Lutherans who I grew up with, said, why are you with these people? Why don't you come back to the church you know and you're comfortable? And I had other people say, why don't you go where you're comfortable and things like that. So that's why I came back. And ultimately it was because this is where God called me to, yeah, which is really interesting. So it wasn't my plan, it was God's plan.
Thank you so much for doing it.
okay.
My aunt and uncle were born again.
Very good, everybody. Good to see everybody.
So you're staying there then?
4 more days.
Do they have washing machines and stuff like that down there?
Yes, they do.
Well, that's good.
I'm all taken care of.
You're probably gonna need it, you know?
Hopefully I'll be there on Sunday.
Good. Oh, good.
Yeah, but which Sunday?
Yeah, well.
My flight on Saturday.
We'll get back by Sunday because we've really missed you, actually.
Well, thank you.
Oh, we have, yeah.
Everybody.
And when are we going to get Donna back here? That's what I'm really.
I know.
We got to get Donna back in here.
We gotta get Donna back. I don't know what happened to her. She left.
Yeah.
Oh, she did.
Well,
She's there.
I
she's
didn't
on-
leave.
No, she's on screen.
I'm on this oxygen. I've got this Rolaids. It's a big deal every time I leave the house.
I know. Yeah, well, we're praying that, you know, the time will come that you can.
Every
So-
Sunday, I say I'm going to do it this Sunday. And
Yeah. Well, Barbara Nugent has started coming to church on Sunday. And she has one of those contraptions like you have.
yeah,
So,
it could be done.
yeah, well, you know,
Because I don't sleep good and I'm up and down all night.
yeah.
So it's like,
Well, you can come this Sunday because I'm preaching again. You'll get some more sleep.
Yeah.
I'll bring a pillow.
Be good.
I'll bring a pillow with me.
All right. It's good to be together. All right.
All right, I'm gonna sign off.
Yeah. All right. So long, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. How do I get out of here?